Hey guys, Pete here. Today I'm going to break down Fargo Season 4, Episode 3. Things are definitely in motion now after a slower start last week, as Raddoppiarlo, which translates to double it, lives up to its name, delivering a lot more movement in the lead up to what we have to imagine is an impending war between the Fadda and Cannon factions. To dispatch with the corny quips and just get this out of the way, Chekhov's pie played its part in leaving us wondering if Fargo might be a more fitting title for the fourth season. I know it's terrible. With those boxes checked, I do have to warn you about spoilers. If you haven't watched episode 3 yet, then this video won't be for you. Hit the subscribe button, go watch the third installment, and then come back once you're finished. Episode 2 ended with law enforcement launching a raid on the Swanee family funeral home. We rewind in time some to see how they arrived there. We watch U.S. Marshal Dick Deffy Warwick follow the trail of the escaped convicts, Zelmera Roulette and Swanee Capps. His journey leads him to Kansas City, and in a sit-down meeting with the chief of police, we learn more about who he is. He's a religious man, more specifically a Mormon, which means he doesn't indulge in caffeinated beverages, warm or cold. His faith makes him an outsider, especially in Missouri, where after the Mormon War of 1838, his people were ordered out of the state by an executive order from the governor. It's a great introduction and spirited exchange where the chief makes a point of reminding him that there's still a standing kill order in place in the state. Of course, Timothy Oliphant is quite at home in the role of a lawman, and carrot-munching Deffy is a good addition to an already large cast of characters. He gets paired up with the local cop, Otis Weff, who's concerned when he gets pulled off the hospital case where he was supposed to be running cover for Josto Fadda. These two don't exactly get along, and after we learn that the marshal is called Deffy because he hears what he wants to hear, we see that in action as they go back and forth. He's smug and bigoted in his own right, but he appears to be competent at his job. That lands him in the right place to close in on the fugitives, but they're not able to take them into custody. After opening up 5 of the morgue's 6 slabs, they encounter a particularly grotesque corpse that causes them to head out of the room. They were that close to finding them, and I have to say the tension in this scene was really great. Elsewhere, we get the meeting of the concierges, Dr. Senator and Abel Volante. These two guys work well in a scene together. They both come off as level-headed, strategic, and comfortable in their positions. Instead of getting straight to the business of the slaughterhouses, Dr. veers into a monologue about his time in World War II. At Nuremberg, he spent 6 weeks interviewing Hermann Goering, coaxing a detailed confession out of him, only to see his 400-page report with footnotes tossed in the garbage. Basically, he learned that his commanding officer was just using him to get under the Nazi skin, forcing him to answer to a black man. It sets the tone for the negotiation where both men know that Donatello didn't give Loy permission to take the slaughterhouse. They both know that the other one knows, but that doesn't change either side's position. Doctor gets up to leave saying, "The slaughterhouses, they belong to us, deal or no deal. You can call it the cost of transition." Oretta goes for a job interview at Dr. Harvard's hospital. The timing is right after the botched drive-by. It left him short-handed, so she basically gets the job because of the nurses who got killed in the violence. Josto is outside watching him from the parking lot plotting his revenge. Oretta sees him as she's leaving and interrupts his stakeout. She's thrilled to run into him. She jokes that he's watching her and talks to him almost like they're in a relationship. While she thinks they've got something going, it's pretty clear that Josto doesn't remember her. That also makes it seem like he didn't realize that their conversation was what set things in motion for her killing his father. One thing leads to another, and she gets him to do a bump of drugs, and then she gives him a hand job while singing the battle hymn of the Republic. This gets his attention enough to ask her name again, but she's so self-confident in her assessment of their budding romance that she thinks he's playing with her. Basically, she rules. Over at the Fadda house, we witness some bonding between Rabbi Milligan and Satchel Cannon. They talk about being traded by their families and how you have to play the hand you were dealt. I think Rabbi is one of the most interesting secondary characters based on his story, and it's clear that makes him protective of Satchel. Gaetano comes in to make sure everyone is uncomfortable, and then he's followed by Josto, who's pissed that everyone's in his office. None of this really made me like the dynamic between these two brothers and how it's being played anymore, but it does drive home the fact that one of them will have to leave the picture before all is said and done. I mean, it had its moments. I think it's the eyes that really turned me off to the Gaetano character, but at the same time, there's some decent stuff in the mix as well. I mean, talking about his house being knocked down and having to live in the trees when he was a kid. A little later, we'll see him push the limits of his position in the family to really underline the unworkable nature of this situation. At the Cannon headquarters, Loy delivers a monologue in front of his oldest son when a junkie comes up to ask him for money. I guess since his character's more reserved, it makes sense that we get a look at his sadistic side. I mean, it's supposed to be this life lesson for his son, and he is the leader of a crime syndicate, so he's not supposed to be a likable character all the way through. Across the street, we see Zelmera and Swanee hanging out, casing the place. It's actually pretty funny that they want to steal from Loy in order to pay him back on the Smutney's loan. Back at the King of Tears, Swanee asks Debrell if it's true her family is cursed as she finally starts digging into Oretta's syrup of Ipecac pie. She talks about her father, and the story has some supernatural vibes to it. I thought the look on Debrell's face stood out when she mentioned the devil and how she said people think it's houses that get haunted, but it ain't. The close-up of the cigarette when she took a drag and the whole thing made me think that these ideas are going to come back up. It also made me think about that strange character in the street we saw when the camera panned from the funeral home over to Oretta standing in her window. There's no definite connection there, but I'm guessing there's going to be some supernatural element that's going to come into play. There were two major events that will both ratchet up the tensions to close things out. First, Gaetano sends the Fadda enforcer Constant Calamita out to strike a blow against the Cannons for the slaughterhouses. He tells him to take Rabbi with him because he wants to know if he's loyal to the family. They go after Loy's oldest son, Lemuel, following him as he's leaving his college. Rabbi's reluctant because he knows this is going to start a war and he's worried about Satchel and Zero. During the pursuit, he figures out that Josto didn't give the order, and when the time comes, he doesn't take the shot, preventing Constant from actually getting a clean shot to kill him. He gets out of the car to walk himself home. He knows this is going to put him on the wrong side of Gaetano, but he may be able to gain favor from Josto. Either way, shots were fired and they were seen, so there's going to have to be consequences. The second big event is our favorite fugitives' plans to rob the Cannon headquarters. When Debrell demands to know what they're up to, Swanee simply responds, being outlaws. They get a ride in the hearse where they have to share a coffin just in case Marshal Duffy is doing surveillance. While they're in there, we get the idea that they're actually a couple, and as Swanee starts farting, we see the syrup of Ipecac is starting to wreck her system. They still go ahead with the robbery, which is certainly more difficult as a result of all the puking and farting. There is some suspense as things unfold, but most of it comes from Swanee's distress as she's losing control of her bodily functions. In the end, they make it out with $20,000, but with 3 people dead, it's going to wind up being about more than just the money. The episode ends with Loy taking stock of the situation. Dr. Senator tells him he thinks it could be a coordinated action, and that would mean the start of an all-out war. Loy's not really sure what to do next because he can't really make sense of why this is happening. After all, they have each other's kids. Doctor wonders who gave the order, the boss or the brother, and puts it out there that the Faddas might be fighting with each other. And he lays it out there. He says, once we start shooting back, it's to the death. So we better be sure, and then the credits roll. So now we can see how everything is starting to come together. Things are escalating, and it's interesting that Oretta influenced both of the big events of the episode. By offing Donatello, she created the power struggle between the Fadda brothers. Her pie also led to the robbery getting messy, and that was at least partially responsible for the chaos that led to the gang members getting shot. For me, she still stands out as the most intriguing character, and I thought Swanee came in right behind her on that list in this episode. They're both wild cards. Marshal Duffy seems like a great addition. Dr. Senator was steady, he stands out from the pack, and he was especially good opposite of Volante. I could go for a sit-down meeting with those two talking every week. Rabbi was always an interesting character, and there seems to be something building with his story. I'm curious to see how things are going to shake out for him, considering Constant will probably try to cover his own ass. I'm still not loving the Fadda brothers at this point, but it does look like Josto and Oretta are heading for a hookup. That could give some credence to the theory that she's Lorne Malvo's mother. Overall, I thought it was a pretty solid episode, better than the last, and I'm liking how things are starting to line up. The cast still feels a little bloated though, it's big. I mean, characters taking a turn is fine, but they're jumping around a lot. Think about it, we've only seen Loy's wife once. Haven't seen much of Zero and Satchel, which have been traded as the foundation for the peace, and we barely checked in with Oretta in this episode. It's not necessarily ruining the experience yet, but I just hope that it'll all fit together well in the end. It's a little messy, but I think it's moving in the right direction. I'm definitely curious as to how it'll all play out. The big picture items of outsiders and people who qualify as being the other, fighting each other over the scraps, it's mostly working. If it's a country of immigrants, how does one become an American? A few Coen brother references jumped out to me, most notably the stockings on the head in the robbery, a "you've got a panty on your head" moment that H.I. from Raising Arizona would endorse. A bit of Big Lebowski slipped in there when Swanee was talking about her dad. Also, dude, Chinaman is not the preferred nomenclature. And Oretta saying paterfamilias, which George Clooney says to Holly Hunter in Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Those are the ones that jumped out immediately to me, but let me know what other ones you picked up on. And with that, I'll leave it there. Let me know in the comments what you think. What did you think about episode 3? Did you think that it's picking up momentum? What's got your interest? What are you hoping to find out in the next episode or two? How do you think the Cannons are going to respond? Please like this video if you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I'll likely be doing Fargo Season 4 videos throughout the season. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll talk to you soon.